All right. Happy Tuesday, everyone. We are coming into the end of April. I cannot believe April 2022 is almost in the rearview mirror. Coming into May. Thank goodness, I got to say, it is warming up here in Milwaukee, which is an excellent time of year for me. But yeah, today I am joined by Omer Glass, and we're back with another Learning Tech Talks. We're exploring all sorts of stuff today in the landscape of learning and workplace tech, but specifically we're talking about Growthspace, which we'll talk about it more, but we're talking about as you framed it, in some ways, the CRM for learning and development or for employee development, which I'm not going to spoil it because Omer is going to give us a lot more details on that. But we're going to be talking about how can we actually pull all this portfolio together and solve multiple problems at once. But as we get into it, let's kind of warm things up like we always do and just kind of get to know who you're talking to. You don't need to hear from me because I already said Milwaukee, and if you watch this, you've watched enough episodes to know probably more about me than many. But Omer, how about yourself? Where are you right now in the world today? I like your background, by the way.
Thank you so much. So the background actually, it's a startup called the Mix Styles, Israeli startup based in North America, where they basically create these cool, small pictures, whatever you want. So I definitely recommend going to their website.
So what? They're just like little sticky tiles you can put on your background?
Yeah, it's like sticky tiles, and you can basically take them out and in. And like I have like the same in my bedroom. I just photos of me and my partner. So basically,
I like it. I could see now. That's interesting to me because this background is the same background everybody's seen for about 2.5 years. I think so. Maybe that's going to be my. Well, I'll have to run it by.
Definitely, and you can definitely make them black. So you asked me where I am right now. So basically, Growthspace is divided between North America and Israel. I just landed a week ago from in Israel. I'm going to spend there some time, and then it's going back and front.
Okay. So wait, so are you in Israel now, or are you in the States?
I'm in Israel.
Okay. So all right. So what time is it there? Because I know we adjusted.
Now it's 6 p.m. But again, it's summertime. So
okay.
Beautiful.
So Omer is giving up his dinner to chat with me. I gotta say that's a big sacrifice, and I appreciate it. It does not go unnoticed. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this before we get into Growthspace itself and just this topic of employee development. I am curious a little bit more about your background because while we've gotten to know each other it's been a bit now, but as we've gotten to know each other, I know a little bit more about you. But folks who may be watching or listening don't. So how did you end up in this? Leading Growthspace? Was that a childhood dream of yours that you just always were pursuing, or how did you end up in the learning tech space?
It's interesting because I'm not an HR person. Like I don't have like your experience in managing learning and development or HR in general. I do have some startup and consulting background. And I will come down to how we started Growthspace in a bit. But I think for me personally was the passion for growth. And this is kind of like our name, Growthspace. So
it's fitting then.
Yeah. I think I was I'm kind of a growth freak. So I really all of my career choices or my hobby choices were around where can I grow? Or what's the next challenge? How can I evolve as a human being? So it can be, running marathon, doing a 10-day Vipassana seminar, or traveling, backpacking the Himalayas, biking in India, or starting a startup was always about growth. So that
is that literally a list of things that you've all accomplished, by the way, or was that just random? I don't know.
Yeah, it's mine personal. So,
all right, that's a pretty solid list.
Yeah, I had climbing the Everest by the time I reached 35, so I will have to postpone it
Okay.
I didn't get it, but I will do it in a few years. But
All
I
right.
think it's
All right.
about
Well,
growth.
it's okay.
Yeah,
It's okay if you push that one out a little bit. I think it's allowed.
yeah, and the family doesn't like it because you can die, etc. But yeah, it's
I can
so I
imagine.
think yeah, I think as human beings we have like the unlimited growth potential in all fronts,
Okay.
in relationship, in skills, etc. So basically, the concept of like we have a great opportunity when we work for organizations to grow, right? So a lot of people choose like a place to work at according to how much can they grow, and this is basically one major passion of mine, although the idea for Growthspace specifically came from my partner after he led an organization, and a lot of people left this organization, like they had high churn, and he started he inquired why, basically. So he did some exit interviews and some surveys, Cloud Trump, etc. And it appeared that people were leaving because they weren't feeling the companies investing enough in their development.
Got it. That's pretty. I
So
mean, it's consistent with a lot of the data that's coming out right now in terms of you look at any sort of organizational health culture scorecard. I mean, a lot of these data reports coming out, people's feeling of whether or not, one, they have opportunity to grow. So some of it's kind of this: do I feel like I see areas that I can grow? But also this whole idea of, but do I feel like the company cares about that? It's one thing if I want to do it and I feel like I can, but if I don't feel supported or enabled by the company and they're kind of like, yeah, do it if you want, I don't really care, that has a significant negative impact on a lot of things. Okay.
definitely.
And so you said I got to fix it.
I got to fix it. So luckily there are a lot of learning and development solutions out there, right? So he spent a lot of money on learning and development solutions. And then he tried to understand, okay, what's the impact? What happened? So he did additional round of surveys, etc. And he saw that, and he spent a lot of money, compared to an average L&D budget. And the results were not only better, they were worse. And he
Really?
I give up. Yeah. So then he called me, and he knew I had some experience in this space. And so he asked me, Omer, how do you create effective employee development? And then I said, nobody really knows.
Okay.
Now, why nobody really knows? Because of there is no real data.
Yeah, I get what you're getting at.
Yeah.
It's a black hole in many regards.
It's a black hole. You just do
it's a total black hole.
Not know that they really work. It's kind of like, think of marketing 20 years ago, when you just run campaigns and you do not have any idea of their actual impact on your business.
Well, and what's interesting about this, and here's where, I was listening to your story, and I told you we were just going to jump all over the place, but a lot of this, even the experiment, because I've seen this similar to what your partner found, is even when it comes to, we throw, there's a tendency sometimes, hey, we have a problem, let's throw training at it, and then let's see if it worked. And even sometimes that, where we go, we may say it did or it didn't. A lot of times, even that, it's hard to say, well, but did it or did it not? Because to the point of the black hole, it's like, well, I guess I technically am not even 100% really sure what was done. We kind of have we think this happened, and then we look and say, did things go up or down? And then we try and project whether or not it was really it. But what happens in between, which is the complexity of employee development, is what we're talking about, where it's like oftentimes it's a complete black hole. We maybe have some completion data, maybe some attendance reports, a few smile sheets that give us some indicators, but for the most part, we don't really know.
I agree.
Okay, so you said, I'm going to fix that. You said, I'm going to, and then
it's a great, we said that it's a great mountain to climb. And then we understood that.
You said you wanted to climb Everest.
Exactly.
And there's the physical Everest, but then at the same time, you said, this thing that's a black hole that's been plaguing, companies and an industry for, wherever. I know, let's climb that Everest as well.
definitely.
Okay.
And but the thing is, when we started Growthspace, it was late 2019, basically. And we knew that, okay, this is going to change. Like the way companies run development is going to be much more data driven and much more connected to business KPIs. And it has to be like a tool, like an actual workflow tool for managers to develop their employees in order to achieve their KPIs. But we said, okay, it hasn't changed for like the last 30 years. My father went through management training, kind of like what's happening today. But we didn't know when. Basically, we knew that it's going to happen, but you never know when. And then COVID hit, and then basically all the development, and just let's like distinct learning from development for a sec, just for our audience. So the way we define learning is basically on-demand, self-paced. So you have their like masterclass, LinkedIn Learning, Coursera. You have the learning management system, the learning experience platform, etc. And then you have development, which is usually ran by humans. It can be from humans within your organization who train others, like mentoring or just other like internal workshops. And it can be external vendors, who can be someone who runs management training, someone who runs like sales training, DEI training, or just one-on-one coaching, mentoring training. So just
so you're kind of breaking apart the asynchronous, self-paced consumption of knowledge versus the kind of rubber hits the road, more action focused. Hey, we're doing something, we're engaging in some component beyond watch this, listen to this, read this.
Yes.
Okay.
Because that's where basically development occurs. Like if you're, let's say your CEO needs to work on like managing board meetings better, or managing management meetings better, or the CFO is going for an IPO, you will not send them to LinkedIn Learning in masterclass, right? You will find someone who can help them. That's how like
unless they somehow manage to be a CEO that knows nothing about it, and you go, we probably should give you kind of the foundations of, you don't even know what an IPO meeting is. Then we might say, yeah, there's opportunity. I don't know that LinkedIn has that course, but if they did, I get what you're saying, where hopefully by that point, the CEO, they have the knowledge base. They have kind of a fundamental understanding. And I think
agree.
now
and
it's
complementary. Like you need both. You need to be able to run from like learning to development. That's why it's also together.
No, and I think, with this, I think that is a really important distinction, because sometimes and I'll be the first to say, I've gotten the question, or it's masked as a question, but in some ways it's somebody kind of poking at me, because I tend to be very outspoken about the importance of development and moving beyond education or knowledge transfer. And sometimes that's perceived as, so you think there's no value to that. You think we could just do, and I'm always clarifying that that's not what I mean at all. In fact, development is a very complex, human development is a very complex thing. And it's part of why I ended up going into that instead of software engineering, because ones and zeros, it's predictable. You can kind of figure that out. That's easy. I mean, it's not easy, but it's easier than people, where there's a lot of this stuff. And I think that point of what we're not saying is that, content or knowledge transfer is bad. No, it's not bad. It's an important ingredient in your mix, but it's not it. That's not where it ends. And I think that's what we're talking about, is that other stuff is where it gets really complicated, especially in terms of tracking, managing, knowing what's going on, being able to say, hey, how do we pull all this together?
And not only that, you have the thing about like the risk is much higher for you as an L&D professional, because you bring an expert. And think about, okay, you put the whole company versus a lecturer, or you connect like one individual like with say a coach. So you have the risk of like, I don't know this person, I don't know if they're good, I don't really have data about their past performance around the actual thing I want them to do. So LinkedIn Learning is there, and it's high quality, and it's monitored, and like your risk is lower. Worst case, they will not look at it. Okay, but in development, your risk is much higher as a professional when you bring in external experts.
Well, and I think that's, what we're seeing. I told you we'd be all over, and I promise with some of these other things I really want to hit on. But if we don't get these foundational pieces vetted out, the rest doesn't fall into place. Because, like you said, the risk, off the shelf content or whatever, if we want to talk the content piece, it is a relatively low risk, and it's also pretty affordable and pretty scalable to say, hey, we can create this, we can make this available to the masses, we can get it out there reasonably quickly, accessibly. Overall, it's fairly simple. Still complicated. I don't want to underplay the effort that goes into that. But when we start talking about this development stuff, this is where it gets complicated, tends to be more expensive, tends to be more personalized, tends to be more resource intensive. And so for those things, like you said, if you have content and not everybody's engaging with it, you can kind of go, well, to some degree, that's the cost of doing business. We can't necessarily hold that expectation to everybody. If you're investing heavily in some sort of targeted employee development initiative that has a fairly sizable price tag and has some major resources going to it, and you go, what are we getting for that? And the answer is, well, we don't really know for sure, but we think it's overall worthwhile. It just doesn't cut it. And I think that's where we run into this issue, where a lot of times organizations either only focus on a very tiny percentage of their audience, or they just don't do it at all because it's just they're not seeing the value.
Yeah.
So then let's talk Growthspace, because I am curious. You're out at, things are opening back up again. You're on the plane. Here, we'll use that as an example because you just flew back to Israel, and you're sitting next to somebody and they say, hey, what do you do? And you're like, well, I'm the founder and CEO of Growthspace. And they go, Growthspace? What's that? I mean, how do you describe it to somebody? Because I think this is a tendency we sometimes have, is we talk to people like they're ed tech founders and whatever, and they kind of go, that sounds nice. How do you describe it to people so that they understand what it is?
So Growthspace, basically, we just talked about it right before we started. If you make the equivalent of a CRM, so Growthspace is employee development management platform. So what does it mean? So basically, you can plan and execute most of your development programs with Growthspace. So let's think about when we talk about development, usually there are basically 4 parts of development. It's kind of like a 2x2. You have development done by internal experts, i.e. your managers, or external experts that you bring someone for a management training, a coach, a lecturer, a group facilitator, etc. And then you have a development that's being done one-on-one or in a group. Right? It can be a small group, a big group. So a Growthspace today can enable you to run development in all of these 4 quadrants. So think about, let's dive into examples, and then we
because I think this will be helpful, because like we said, go for it.
Let's say you're running a talent program, for example, for your high potential. Okay, so you say, okay, so these are top talents of the organization. I want to offer them something very personalized. So with Growthspace, you can onboard all of your talent population, say it's like 5%, 10%, 20% of the organization. And each one of them, the platform will do its assessment, Growthspace assessment. Usually it's combining the direct manager and the individual, the participant with going through the program. The platform will match them with one of 3 experts that are tailored to what they need to achieve. They will choose the expert that they want to work on based on the data that the platform will show them, because the platform will basically tell them why this person is the best one and how successful were they in their past engagements with Growthspace, with people who are similar to them, with challenges similar to them. And then they will go through a 5-session sprint. And
Okay.
after the sprint is over, the platform will measure the impact, both by asking the participant, how did it go? Did it cater to, like, did it, how was your progress on the goals that you defined? But also the direct managers, because the direct managers
so as part of the onboarding, then you're bringing the manager in along from the journey from the start.
Definitely, the managers cannot be disconnected from learning and development. I think maybe 3 things that eventually we enable our customers is to use data in a whole different way that they're using today, meaning they get actual data on the experts based on what they want to achieve. So think about it, like one size doesn't fit all.
No.
Some experts in development can be really good with management. Some can be really good with DEI. Some of them can be really good with productivity, like productivity tricks, managing your calendar. And some of them are great with, like, helping salespeople, like SDRs, to prospect better. And some of them running agile sprints, right? They're totally, like, a lot of different skills that people want to develop. And you need to be able to find the best person for your specific skill. And not only that, also to be able to see data about their past performance in different engagements. So this is number 1, basically, the data piece. The second piece is connecting to business KPIs. You have to connect learning and development to the business, because everything
otherwise it's a lot of effort for what?
So how do you connect learning and development to the business? You need to involve direct managers, and you need to involve also, like, the VPs who heads the function. Let's say you work with R&D. You need to work with the VP R&D in order to connect to its agenda. And you need to be able, basically, to connect it to the business, and eventually to be a tool for managers to succeed. And the third thing that you need would be fast time to market, because you need it now. And let's say you open a new office in Bangkok and you need to train the managers there. You cannot wait 6 months. You need it now.
You can't build a custom program. Yeah.
So that's what Growthspace is doing. So I just gave an example of, like, one-on-one setting. And by the way, this one-on-one setting will basically, with Growthspace, so you have the platform, the whole capability to manage one-on-one programs or group programs, workshops, lectures, internal mentoring, and you have the experts on the platform. So it's a combination of software and experts who are.
Well, that's what, and again, I think this is, because I want to unpack this for folks, because I think a lot of times what I find is folks, and I even get this as follow-up questions sometimes to shows where they go, okay, so how does it fit in, or where does this work? Because if I'm hearing you correctly, and I agree, I think one of the biggest challenges is, for the most part, I think a lot of L&D organizations, and there's still opportunity, but they can get content to people. I don't know that that's necessarily one of our biggest problems. Is somebody's like, I don't know anything about this. What do I do about it? I think L&D orgs can be pretty good at kind of saying, well, we've curated a list of resources and this and that, but that doesn't always cross that personalized bridge of, okay, but we really need something more targeted, because we know people need to be able to do this. Like, we can't just be like, they can pass a test. They actually have to be able to execute against this. And I would say a lot of folks in our space are left kind of going, well, we've got 2 options. One, we can go to your, we're opening a new, center, and what the temptation can be, well, let's go build something, which that can be time consuming, expensive. And again, you look at the return and it's like, well, this is a very short-term thing. Are we really going to, heck, we spend 6 months building something, we may be already there and it's behind us, type of a thing. Or you just go, well, we'll just kind of let them figure it out and hope they figure it out, which that's not really a good thing either. So if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're doing is, in some ways, you're building a marketplace of expertise and experience for people that you can say, hey, let's connect these people in with experts who can help them on targeted things. And again, tapping into your ecosystem of where those exist today. And if I heard you right, is it also an additional ecosystem? Clarify that for me.
So Growthspace is a platform that connects and integrates with a lot of things that you're already doing. So you have your HRIS, you have the LMS, you have the HR analytics. So basically Growthspace handles the development piece. So you can run programs, development programs, and tailor them to what you need. So for example, you just mentioned, I want to run management training. So with the Growthspace, you can say, okay, I want to start this management training in a workshop. And maybe this workshop will be in different subjects.
It might exist. It may be something that's already happening. Okay.
Maybe it's something that's already happening or something that you want to take from the platform. But you will manage all of that in the platform. Then it's also connecting you. Let's say you want, okay, I want each manager to work with something will come up after the management workshop. And I want each and every one of them to work with a trainer, with a mentor, with a coach, for a one-on-one program. So basically the platform will enable you to run whatever development program you wanted on the platform in a data-driven way, in a curated way. So there is, the marketplace piece where you find the right expert for each and every one of your needs.
Okay. Well, and I keep replaying this back just again, because I think just to make sure it's clear how this works, because one of the things I think that where I see a problem happen in L&D, and a challenge that hits a lot of L&D or HR leaders, is we want and try to do this in some ways, but this is often far more complicated than people realize, right? Like we may conceptually in our heads go, I'm just going to use your example. Okay, we're opening a new division in X country. We've got 10 leaders that need to get in there and do this. And we go, okay, great. Now, if we were to go minority report and try and figure out what pieces we need together, conceptually, we can pull it together and say, well, on the front end, we need to kind of do this workshop to kind of get them prepped. Then after that, we need to connect them with these folks. We do all that. A lot of times where the rubber hits the road and where people just hit a brick wall is, okay, so how do we do that? How do we actually do that? And where I think sometimes organizations struggle is the tech stack that we have today is very limited. I will say you'll see some platforms that are coming in saying, well, and again, common use case, well, let's create a pathway in the LMS. I'm sure nobody listening has ever thought that's the path we go. But hypothetically, that might be where you go, is you say, well, we'll create a pathway in the LMS, which on paper sounds like an easy solution. We'll just create a pathway in the LMS. We'll put the content objects and the workshop, and we'll just kind of like bundle it together and then push it out to these folks. But I think that what you're getting at is the complexity within the execution of that pathway often a lot of times goes just missed. And as a result, it doesn't happen. So the example you gave of, okay, the pull through on this workshop, let's say the workshop is to kind of set the stage on, hey, you're moving into this market. Here are the things you need to consider. We're working together as this cohort to work on this. The next step in that is to actually work with an expert who has established new facilities in a different country. And a lot of times L&D is left going, I have no idea. How are we going to make that happen? And it just gets punted. It just gets kind of punted as, well, we'll make that an activity box in the LMS and we'll put it on them to figure out. And then it doesn't happen. And I think that, tell me if I'm way off track, but to me, I see this happen time and time again, is where that's what happens. You go, well, we know this needs to happen. We have no idea how to actually connect the people together, follow up whether it actually happened. So it ends up being an activity box in a pathway that somebody's told, just go check it off, and that's it. That's where it ends. And we go, well, we think it happened because it got checked in the box, but I have no visibility into, did they actually get connected with the right expert? Were they actually getting the development or the coaching or the mentoring they needed to do it? Is it working to actually make them better? And so we have this nice pathway that looks like, well, people went through it, but honestly, it's not really designed to manage the complexity of that kind of development. It's meant to manage a pathway of, here's some stuff that you can consume in a structured
And
fashion, which
that's
again is important.
That's exactly the missing link, because
yes,
it cannot be only software and it cannot be only expert. It needs to be combined, because you need, and I think everyone in the audience, including you, I'm getting so many questions. Hey, do you know, I need a mentor for VP R&D. I need someone who has been there, who has been a VP R&D. Like, I just had this question last week from one of my former clients. She asked me, and then you know how much time she's looking for? 3 months.
I have no doubt it's countless hours
Another
spent trying to solve this.
I think another, like the use case about a new office in Bangkok, is another one of our customers was trying to find someone like local, like in Thailand, in Bangkok, to run management workshop. So they were looking for months and they didn't find, because they don't have the connections, and they need someone good. So what if you can just onboard, like log into a platform, design what you really want to achieve? It can be one-on-one program, and it can be like management workshop in Bangkok. And then you explain to the system, what do I need? And then you get, bam, 3 experts. And here is the data about these experts. This is how they perform in similar companies to yours. You get suggestions about like what will be better, and you get like all of the execution taken care of.
Yeah.
And
I think, and that's why I wanted to unpack this, because this is where, with the best intentions, organizations are trying to do the right thing. But this is hard to try and manage independently. And going back to where this causes even bigger challenges is that you could say, well, we could try and do this internally. You could, hypothetically, but to your point of spending 3 months to try and find somebody for this one thing, for this small group of people who it's a short-term initiative. This isn't a sustaining, ongoing thing we need till the end of time. To search, curate, build all that kind of expertise, a lot of orgs would say, well, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to go through 3 months of pain for something for 9 people. And as a result, it gets ignored. But the problem is that office opening in Bangkok now is suffering because, well, it didn't make sense for us to do this for that small audience. Well, it certainly did to them if you were to talk. It certainly did to them if you were to talk to them about their needs. But the problem is, and I get it, if you're dealing with big enterprise solutions, you may say, we just don't have the capacity to lean in. And I can say this from running enterprise organizations where you go, I see lots of challenges. Unfortunately, I can't solve them all, because if I tried to solve them all, it'd be an issue. And I think that's the pain point, just from our discussions, that I see you helping organizations solve. And I think that's where tapping into your external marketplace of expertise is the part that I wanted to emphasize. This isn't just connecting what you already have, because that could feel overwhelming to an organization going, holy, like to try and track down everything we already have. That's, I've tried doing that to date and I can't do it. But what you're saying is, well, yeah, we know that, which is why we're also augmenting it with our basically portfolio of expertise. So if you go, I need a management training person who can actually coach and give expertise to a center that's opening up in Bangkok, instead of you hunting all that down, you have access to that. Fair?
And think about, this is just one, right? We talked about one.
That's one, right? Yeah.
In Bangkok, and one VP R&D who needs some training. But what if now you want to support the whole managers of, like in the company, or the whole R&D department, and you want to match them with like people like them, just more senior, or people who master other stuff? Like, what if you want to offer one-on-one, really at scale, one-on-one development? You want, like, I have like one of my customers, a CEO of a company over 1,000 people. And he told me, our R&D organization, we have 2 problems. They overcomplicate and they do not communicate well. It's like,
I've never heard that from an R&D group ever. That's weird. being totally
and
sarcastic.
everything is the same. And then I know.
Yep.
And but how do you cater to that? You send them like, and even a workshop, it will not cater to each and every individual needs. So, okay, let's say the CEO is saying, okay, this is something I want to get off my table, and I want to match every one of them with an expert suited to their specific problem.
Okay.
What would you do? Like, how do you manage that?
Well, and I think that's the challenge is if you're sitting in the chair where you're managing this for the enterprise, this is oftentimes where an L&D or a talent management org would say, that's too specific. Now, granted, if it's coming from the CEO, you're probably not going to get away with going, that's not really our space. But realistically, if it's coming from, and these pain points come out all the time from functional groups, we've got a major pain point with this targeted group of people, and it's serious. We need to do something about it. Can you help? And a lot of times, the enterprise center group is saying, I hear you. Unfortunately, we can't sit and cater to all these little, 10, 15, 7, because if we did, we just don't have the resources to do it. Because going back to it in our minds, we're like, well, because it'd take 3 months to try and track down one expert to solve this problem, let alone 7 for the 7 people that you need, and then get to know what those things are. And I think that's where the idea of this being scalable sounds so impossible that a lot of times it just gets brushed off. And it said, this isn't a need we can meet. Go figure it out for yourselves, which often leaves the functional groups going, a lot of help you are. Thanks.
Definitely. The goal, I think our goal, as like HR professionals, is to solve business problems with our tools, HR tools.
Yep. So, yeah, we do.
that's
what often happens because it's what we know. And then it's, if it's unfamiliar, it's like, I don't really know. I'm not really sure.
And think about the ability to, like, what happened to the leader of the Bangkok office after enabling them to develop their managers, or like what will happen to the organization if you can match all of the people with communication experts, and then the whole communication of the organization changed. So eventually it's running programs who will serve the business using various experts, because no matter, like, unless you're, one of like the top 10 companies in the world, how many experts can you work with? 10, 20 experts? Like, we have over 1,000 experts on our network. Not only that, with a lot of data about how they performed in each and every one of our use cases with our customers. So you get the experts, you get the data, you get a platform, and also, of course, you get like our customer success team who enables you to run everything smoothly. So it's basically taking a load of like grunt work off your back, and then you can focus on what you're really here for, right?
Yeah.
You're kind of, I think,
well,
like,
and I
learning
think the tendency. Yeah. Well, and what's interesting about this is, I'm kind of like thinking some of the hurdles that you may run into out of the gate on this, in terms of like pushback, because one, I've been in plenty of orgs where sometimes the response is, well, I'm sure we have that expertise internally. Like, can't we just connect it ourselves? It's kind of like back in the SaaS days when SaaS was first getting off the ground and everybody went, couldn't we just build that ourselves? Do we really need to go by? And it's like, no, because it doesn't make sense. It's not a good use of resources and time, because we can't keep pace with that. So even to your example of, could you build your own internal network of internal SMEs? I mean, even honestly, as I'm just in my head trying to piece that together, yeah, in theory, I suppose you could, but it's going to have major gaps, because you're going to go, well, we don't necessarily have all that expertise. It's still going to be internal to your organization. And 3, the effort going into it, why try and do that? And it sounds to me like where you're really focusing is saying, let us do that, because it doesn't make sense to try and build and scale that for yourself internally. I mean, you're just not, no organization is dynamic and large enough to build that kind of expertise network internally. And even if you could, it's going to have tunnel vision, because it's your own people that they're going to think about your company. So that's where you would tap into it, but making it actually attainable versus you trying to go around with your Rolodex. There's a blast from the past, and trying to actually keep tabs on all this stuff, and you do all the curation, and you figure out, well, when this happens, I pass them off to this and all of that, which would again be a resource intensive nightmare to try and manage centrally.
That's the point.
Well, and again,
I'm buying. You convinced me.
Well, I'm really glad that I've convinced you that this is a problem we're solving type of it. But again, I think this is, I talk a fair amount about, we said this early on. Is there anything wrong with education and knowledge? No, there's not. There's not. But it's about, what do you need to do to take this beyond that? How do you move beyond education and actually move into development, type of a thing, where you go, you know what, we actually need to make sure people have the capability to do this, and it's measurable, because this is going to be the difference between that Bangkok office succeeding or tanking. I mean, this is the difference between that office making it or not. And I think that's where, kind of going, well, this is the best we can do because this is what we can do today. So, it's not really our problem, and punting. It's especially today, like you said, 2019 and beyond, our organizations are looking to us as talent development leaders to go, how do you do this? How do you do this? We have these real problems and we don't know how to solve them. And we thought the way we've always done it was fine. And the last 3 years have just grossly exposed the fact that it doesn't work. It's not meeting our needs. So what do we do? And I think that's put a lot of us in a position of going, conceptually, we know what to do. Practically speaking, we're at a bit of a loss.
Yeah. And in addition to that, I think something really good happened due to the pandemic, where before the pandemic, you wanted some development or training. You were confined to the 10-mile radius around your office, right? You need to bring someone. You're in San Francisco, you're confined to San Francisco or Milwaukee. But now you basically open the borders because you're working virtually. And then you can be much more granular and have much better experts that maybe are from New York. Maybe you want a great DI expert, or a great expert on managing metrics interfaces with India. And they do not have to be in your tail mile radius.
You don't, that example of we're trying to do this in India, you don't have to be well, who do we have in Boise, Ohio or Boise, Idaho that can do that? And it's well, nobody. So I guess we're just out of luck and we're going to have to do our best. You can actually tap into it and go, well, no, we actually have somebody who's a subject matter expert in this area that we can pull in to help us get through this. But you have to be willing to ask for help. So that leads me to this next question, because I do think that this is one of the challenges that I've encountered my entire career is, this works. This is hard as heck as it is. So just to be clear, anybody watching or listening who's thinking that they're we're framing this up oh, it's just a piece of cake. You just do this and it goes. This is hard. I think what you're talking about and where you're going is designed to make it easier, but it's still not the easy button where you just go beep, bop it and bibbidi bobbidi boo, it's solved. Because the reality is, so I am curious, when you work with organizations like this, I have lots of kids, so the Disney analogies just fly off. But not all organizations necessarily even recognize what those very specific problem sets are. Okay, so let's say, hey, we're opening an office in Bangkok. That could be just perceived as this general, so go get something. We need some training for opening that. How are you helping organizations? Because this is a lot of work to actually say, right, but what do we need to be successful to open that office? And I guess even as I'm talking through that, I'm curious where you help organizations on that, because to some degree, you need to do a little bit of unpacking to figure out, well, what do we actually think we need? But to some degree, it's also saying, well, we don't know. And that's why we need experts who have done it to actually tell us, you think you need to move right. I'm telling you, don't move right, because that's what everybody thinks. And that's a problem. You actually need to make this play.
Yeah. So two angles or two ways to answer this question is number one, benchmark. Okay. So usually you operate within your organization. Maybe you have some friends in our organization. Maybe you're in a WhatsApp or Slack group or a forum online, and you ask people, okay, I want to develop managers in a new site that I'm opening in Bangkok. What would you do? Because you can do a bunch of stuff, right? You can give everyone a LinkedIn Learning subscription. You can run lectures. You can run internal mentoring. You can run a lot of things. But the question is, what works for a lot of other companies like me in similar situations? So number one, like in the platform, you can find other things that companies like you did. And you can see the results of like actual programs that they ran before. Okay. So this is another database. The second piece, sometimes you do. So
instead of just guessing what you think and going, yes, I think this is what we need to do, you can actually learn not only just for like experts in terms of connecting people, but actually say, hey, this is a problem we're trying to solve. What have other organizations done to solve this? That's worked. So instead of us starting from ground zero going, let's sit in a conference room and brainstorm our crazy idea.
Benchmark. I always say I have this a book somewhere here, still like an artist.
Okay.
So still like an artist. Do not invent the wheel. Sometimes something that other company created was amazing and it achieved this and that KPI. This is number one. Number two, again, I'm coming back to the assessment tool that we offer. The managers always know what their people need. You're managing people right now. And if I'll ask you about each and every one of them, you will tell me where they need to grow. Okay, this person is too stubborn. This person is not in the details. This person is like all over the place. I want them to focus or manage their calendars better, or I want them to speak up in meetings, or I want them. I want someone from learning and development to explain them because I do not have the time, right?
Okay. Yep.
So think of asking the managers, and again, the platform, the manager is a crucial entity on our platform because the managers are eventually who are we set to serve. And once you just give it to people, let's say you give Growthspace, let's say one-on-one programs to all of your managers, their managers will define their specific scope of where they need to grow. Yeah. And then think about like solving the most burning need of each of their managers at scale. Your organization is in a totally different place.
Okay. Well, and so I like that piece because I think that it taps into a couple different things, which requires a shift. I mean, first of all, one, there is this level of, and I'm trying to encourage this just across the board, is that, I think sometimes we think that asking for help or asking that what other people have done is somehow inferior to figuring it out yourself. And it's not. It's not. And I think that's one of those moments of, it's okay to say, oh, I don't know how to do this. And that doesn't invalidate your expertise just because you say, I haven't done this specific thing. I know some things, but this specific area, I'm not 100% sure. And so we should actually kind of benchmark and ask around to make sure that somebody else has solved this before. Why do we need to go through from ground zero? And so I think but that's a shift. And I will say some leaders and some orgs have a much harder time saying, that versus no, we're this, we are unique. And I think that's a shift. But I think also asking the leaders, I like that in the sense that, sometimes I hear a lot of conversations about this with employee experience, where people talk about, how bad employee experience is, and we need to improve the employee experience and da 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 da. And then you say, I mean, have we asked the employees what the experience is like? And sometimes it's like, what? No, but we get a general, we think we know. And that's what we're saying is, well, let's include those people in it. Now, my follow-up question to this is, what have you seen with leaders or with people engaging with this? Because I think sometimes there can be a tendency to want to change everything all at once. Well, what do you want to do with this person on your team? All the things they need, this and this, versus, what, really, if I were to prioritize, if we could really get them to change this, because anything you read will tell you, you overwhelm people with trying to change too much. They just shut down and don't do any of it. So I'm curious, when you actually engage in that approach where you're actually asking and targeting the managers for things like that, is there this tendency to overprescribe or just pick too many things? Or is it something that happens when general assumptions are made from, somewhere else, and it's kind of pushed down and it's like, well, all the things? What is there still that challenge that you overcome, or do you find that when you actually work directly, they do a better job of going, actually, because you talked earlier on, you do these sprints. It's like 5 weeks. We were really going to focus in on developing this and make sure you get better at it. Do the managers do a pretty good job of saying, yeah, I get it, we can't fix everything with Bill or Jane or whatever, but if we could change this, that's really where the money's at?
It's quite simple, actually, because I definitely agree with you. Like, if you will try to work on something very broad, or let's just talk every other week, you will achieve nothing. And then your money, like your ROI is zero, because that's a problem if it's too broad, too fluff, too unfocused. But if you say, okay, Chris, you're not speaking up in meetings. You have great ideas. You're super smart, but in a bigger forum, except you and I, you're not speaking up. I want you to speak up once in every meeting. I want to hear your voice once. Then it's much easier to understand, okay, this is what we want to achieve. And from the other end, to find the right expert who can help you with this particular challenge. So the platform basically forces the manager to choose one thing.
Forces them
one thing. And the way it's presented to the manager, it's in like, what will happen differently? So it's not like work on your leadership, but have Chris speak up more in meetings, or have Chris provide a
Nobody's asking for that, by the way. Nobody's saying Christopher speak up more in meetings.
He needs to speak less. I have some, we have some silence experts who can help you to just sit and listen. Yeah.
No, but I think so I think that's really helpful. And I'm glad I asked that question, because to flesh that out, that is a muscle that is often not strong for people. It's difficult. And there were two things that you hit on with that. Is one, there is this tendency to kind of think too broadly, or think about too many things and be like, well, this and this and this, or describe it in real general. They need to be better at leadership. I mean, what the heck is that? Like, I can't, if somebody said you need to work on being a better leader, that's like, okay. And you might end up working on something that is not even a problem, or isn't actually your biggest problem type of a thing. So I think that kind of forcing people to think more granularly about not leadership, what about it? Like you said. And again, I think this is another one that this is a good principle for anybody, regardless of what you're doing, but talking about it in terms of practical, pragmatic terms. Like you said, I want you to speak up at least once in every meeting. That's something somebody can feel like, okay, I can develop in that. That's achievable. I can work on that. getting better at leadership feels like I don't. And again, then that again continues
or
to improve the
management
trickle
or
effect.
communications or
Right. Communicate.
productivity or whatever, like engineer.
Exactly.
Be a better engineer, be a better salesperson.
But a lot of times
Wait,
that's what
why?
happens.
What do I need to do? Do I need to convert people from the first meeting to the second meeting better? Okay, now it's better. So maybe I need to work on my demo skills, whatever it may be. Maybe I need to prospect better. Maybe I need to personalize better. So you have to become more and more granular, and you have
Surgical.
to focus surgical and focus on like the Pareto, the 80%, like that 80-20 rule. And then you're better.
Well, and I think it's this front end of actually helping narrow that down is such an important piece, because again, I mean, we've all been there. Somebody tells you you need to be a better communicator, and you just look at them like, okay, like I don't know what to do with that. But getting down to, okay, you need to stop interrupting. You need to stop interrupting. You have a terrible tendency when people are talking to just jump in instead of letting them. Okay, I can work on that. That's something that will improve my communication skills, but is an action I can take to actually get better at that. And I think that other piece though is, and I think this is where what we've talked about in terms of how the tech can help, that can feel overwhelming for somebody sitting in an enterprise chair looking to do that for, I mean, even a small organization, 50, 100 people. You start talking big enterprise, tens of hundreds of thousands of people, that can feel like an impossible feat to say, how on earth would we ever do that? And I think that's what you're talking about, is democratizing that and saying, we're actually allowing at an enterprise level, you to enable that level of personalization without all of the chaos of actually trying to do that individually for each little pocket.
Yes, it's all about Seth Godin has the term of like edge crafting, where like you want to create something unique, you need to go to the edges or create something like very unique. Like Amazon, it's like it's the easiest. There was never like an easy way to order like a drinking bottle or a notebook or a phone or whatever it may be, Amazon. So if you want to create the best learning experience, always think about, okay, if you just had one person to develop, what would you do? What would you do? And it's always the same. Like, okay, for the VP R&D, it's just one person. I will find a VP R&D just more experienced that can support him in his role. So it just the technology, the beauty of technology is that it enables us to take it at scale. There are great companies out there who do this like very, I came across a company called the Word 50. Like they find the right expert in the world for like, okay, you're a CEO of a shipping company in Singapore. They will find another one like exactly like you, just more than their own. And then they will match you together for development. And it's amazing. Just it's like tens of thousands of dollars. But think about creating the same experience at scale, like to your whole managers, talents, DEI, whatever population you want to develop.
Not for tens of thousands of dollars per person.
Not for tens of thousands of dollars. In a much more competitive.
So I kind of don't want to stop, but I know that if I start opening up another can, we're just going to end up going down a path. But I think, what I really like kind of closing on this note is this edge, whatever you called it, the
edge crafting.
Edge crafting, where it's like, I get it. And I think sometimes this is where, as a field, we've been in some ways kind of beat down into we'll never be able to do that. And we've actually stopped thinking about it sometimes. We've actually just moved away from that. Just feels so far off and so untouchable. We just don't even consider it. And I think, the practice I use is saying like, what would we do if we could do anything? I'm not saying we're going to get there, but what would we do if we could do anything? And let's craft that and then we'll figure out whether we can or not. And I think this is what's exciting about the technology side, is that things that we used to say that can't happen, well, yes, it can. And I think that's where this edge crafting, whatever you want to call it, of we need to push ourselves to go, what could we do? What would we do? Because I don't think I've ever talked to an L&D leader. Well, I won't say never, but I would say many leaders in the space, they want to do more. They recognize they'd like to, but we've kind of gotten so, just pushed back into this corner of, well, that'll never happen, it's just not possible, that we've missed it. We've missed it, and we've stopped doing that. And I think this is an encouragement to folks to say, don't stop, keep pushing for that edge. And what we've talked about today is some of those things that you may have put on the list of, we'd love to, but it just ain't going to happen. Well, that's not necessarily the case anymore. So keep pushing it.
Keep pushing.
All right. Like I said, I told you we would end up going way too long if I keep going. So Omer, I appreciate it. I have already kept you way past, 7 o'clock your time. So I appreciate you making the time, eating dinner a little bit later on my behalf. For everybody watching, I hope you got something out of this conversation. I know that the time was off, so I see folks, some are just joining now. You can catch the live replay on this. It'll be here on LinkedIn and on all the other channels that I always put it at. So Omer, I wish you a wonderful rest of your evening, and look forward to staying connected.
Thank you so much.